Today I want to talk to you about the value of planning. You know, it's funny, when I got married to my wife, she was the one that was always very, she kind of flew by the seat of her pants. She was very spontaneous. I was the absolute polar opposite. I was very pragmatic. I loved contingency plans. I would begin planning a month before the vacation as to where we were going to go and what we were going to take with us. And if we had a flat tire, this is the tools that I would need. And I thought through all those different things. And you know, really all my life I've found that each of us have, well, we are either a lot like my wife or we're a lot like me. And sometimes planning is one of those things that just doesn't seem very important to people. But I want to tell you a story because I think stories relate a lot of truth, and they sometimes can leave an imprint in our mind that is important because stories can teach us lessons. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to talk about something that most of you probably feel as though either A, you don't need, or B, you're in a position where, you know what, it's just not worth the money. But I want to talk about why planning is so important using life insurance. I recently had a situation with a client, and many years ago, many years ago, this gentleman was introduced to me, and I was young and wet behind the ears, and I knew that this guy had a need for life insurance. He was a big-time farmer, and he had a lot of debt, and he was an optimist. But this guy said, you know, I don't want life insurance. I don't need life insurance. And now, of course, his wife was sitting there at the kitchen table, and she begins to elbow him just a little bit. And so finally, after the course of a few minutes, he kind of relents, and he says, well, I suppose I could probably use a little. Well, fast forward the story just a little bit, and he did buy a little. He didn't buy enough, and he didn't buy a long enough amount of life insurance, but he bought some, and some is better than none. Oftentimes I'm asked, well, what's the best kind of life insurance to have? And, well, the best kind to have is the kind that's in force when you die. But fast forward now about 15 years, and his life insurance was coming to an end because he had only bought a limited amount. And so he calls me and he says, well, you know, it's time for us to look at the life insurance. You know, it's coming to the end of its term. And he said, you know, I still have that $1 million worth of debt. And so I said, well, have you continued to buy farms? Yeah, we've still bought the farm, and so we probably need to keep some of that life insurance in force. But there was a little bit of a problem. The problem was his health had significantly declined. He had been diagnosed with cancer, and of course, you know how it goes. None of us want any life insurance until we know that we have the potential to die, or we have some big thing in our life that indicates to us and wakes us up to reality that we're human beings and we're not going to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof all the rest of our lives. But nevertheless, we were successful in getting, at least keeping, some of the life insurance. Well, it wasn't enough, it wasn't long enough, and he knew in the back of his mind that so many years ago, that fateful appointment that we originally had, that he should have done more and he should have been better at planning. But you know, part of the reason why he didn't do the planning was because he said, you know, if I die, why, my wife, she's got it all taken care of. She'll have the farm, she'll have the hogs, she'll be able to do this, and this. In his mind, he had it all worked out. But he had never really considered the fact that when a spouse is dead and gone, the surviving spouse has a lot to deal with. Not only financially, but most importantly, emotionally. And he just couldn't see it. He just thought she was going to handle life the same way he would handle life if she had died. Well, it wasn't but just the end of last year. She came home from getting groceries at the store, and she heard the backhoe running in the barn. And she didn't think much of it at first, and she kept unloading the groceries, but the sound of the backhoe just kept ringing in the back of her mind, and she couldn't figure out why it was there. It wasn't moving. And so she went out to investigate, and unfortunately, she found her husband completely crushed behind the backhoe in the barn, asphyxiated to death. Now here's the thing. Not only did he die too young, but he died without enough life insurance. And that poor lady today is going to end up losing at least a good portion of the farm. Simply put, because she doesn't have the revenue, she doesn't have the income, and she's got too much debt. Now, the planning that I'm referring to doesn't necessarily have to mean just having enough life insurance. That's just one scenario. But how about planning for retirement? You know that retirement is coming. You know that when you retire, the paychecks stop. And the question is, how are you going to replace the income that is now gone? Let me ask you, when it comes to planning, have you taken the time to sit down with a qualified estate planning attorney to actually determine who gets what and how, so that your family isn't ripped apart by schisms and strife and argument? Planning comes in many different forms, but planning doesn't happen just by thinking about it. Planning occurs when you do it. Think of this. We get told all the time that time changes everything. But you know what? That's a lie. Time doesn't change anything. Only change changes something. So if you want to be proactive, I encourage you today, meet with a respected financial advisor. Sit down and begin to assess where you're at in life, and use that wisdom, that expertise that financial advisor expresses to you and has for you, so that you can prepare to be successful in the future. Well, there's your tip for retirement success. I'm Matthew Johnson, President and owner of Johnson Wealth and Income Management. Make it a great day.